Ladies and gentlemen, let's RetroGamer.com video. It's fair to say that there have been an awful lot of rumours concerning the PlayStation 4K, also known as Neo, and the potential successor for the Xbox One or the Xbox 1.5 or next Xbox or whatever you want to call it at this point. However, a new rumour has popped up which details that the Xbox One 2, if you prefer, has entered mass production and did so in February of this year. Now, this thread on NeoGAF has been started by a chap by the name of Ekim, that's E-K-I-M, and he posted an image, and according to another member, his name is Kamfer Zeon, that's Z-E-O-N. The literal translation reads as Xbox One 2nd generation. The expected production capacity is 400,000 per week, which equates to about 1.2 million a month. Which doesn't sound particularly high, but that could be down to the whole yields of AMD at the moment, and we know they're starting to ramp up production and all of that stuff. Now, it's quite interesting because there are a couple of things you can read. For example, the fact that Kingston are providing some of the parts, who are obviously a pretty reputable memory slash storage manufacturer. It has a weight of 600 to 800 grams. Now, remember, these are plastic components, so they don't particularly weigh too much. Now, what's really interesting here is AMD have said that they have created some whole new custom chips recently. They are new design wins, which you could take as saying, well, it's not just a die shrink or a Xbox One Slim, whereas others are saying, well, it is an Xbox One Slim. Unfortunately, there's just not enough information either way. Things get even more confusing when you recall that there have been a few reports that there are going to be more than a single SKU. Now, these reports have actually popped up thanks to things such as the FCC, and essentially speaking, the report indicates that we're going to see 2 SKUs. Unfortunately, because it's basically, for the most part, in code, it's very difficult to understand what they are. It says type 1 base with a config label, which is just a whole bunch of jumbled letters with just base 03, and difference without audio IC, and then the next one is type 2 premium with audio IC. So you can take that as so many different ways. You can take that as one is an Xbox One, which is slimline with a few additional components. You can take that as one as an Xbox Slim, and one is an entirely new, more powerful SKU. You can take that as both of them are entirely new SKUs, entirely new designs, which are considerably more powerful, but there are some inherent differences with the designs. For example, it could be that one, the base unit could be, let's say, 4K streaming orientated with, let's say, 4K DVD playback and all this stuff, but the other one could be more expensive and offer greater performance. It's just completely and utterly a mystery. And one thing everyone brings into this is Phil Spencer, when he said that Microsoft are not interested in releasing a half measure, an Xbox One, I guess you could say, the equivalent of the PS4K. But there are 3 potential possibilities with this. 1, the Xbox One Slim is not that. It's a cost-reduced model, potentially. So let's say, for the sake of argument, Microsoft were to release this and it would cost, let's say, $200 US. That would be a really, really good thing for Microsoft. It would mean that the Xbox One sales would pick up. It would be a good, cheap entry for them. And let's say in late 2017, they could think about releasing another Xbox, right? That's one potential possibility. And it means that Phil was being 100% accurate. They're not releasing a new Xbox. One is Phil was not being truthful. That's always a possibility, or he was being very PR-y, or he didn't know, which is unlikely, but it's potentially possible he didn't know about it. Or the new Xbox is massively more powerful, and therefore he doesn't consider it to be an incremental upgrade. Now, it's also kind of down to the wording, because an incremental upgrade for the Xbox One is not the same as an incremental upgrade for the PS4 because of the difference in console performance. For example, if you were to double the PS4's power, you're looking at about 3.6 teraflops of performance, right? Now, obviously, the PS4 is about PS4K, just to clarify, is about 2.27, 2.28 times faster than the base machine, but that's just rounding. If you were to do the same for the Xbox One and say it's 2 times more powerful, its GPU is about 1.3, that means it's about 2.6 teraflops, which is obviously rather large difference. So an incremental upgrade for the Xbox One, let's say 2 times more powerful, is a hell of a lot easier to achieve, but a bigger step forward is also a lot easier to achieve. So let's say that they were to release a very equally powerful GPU, let's say the equivalent of 3 times more powerful than the original Xbox One, which would be about as powerful as the PS4K. I'm just rounding figures up here, so don't say it's 3.1 point. I'm just doing quick, rounding up. But let's just say they were to do that. That would be a massive upgrade for the Xbox One. Or they could even go a few percent higher. For example, the configuration of the compute units for the PS4K is, from memory, 36. They could go with 37, they could go with 38, they could go with 40, because 40 is supposedly, once again, this is all down to leaks, the maximum configuration of Polaris 10. And obviously they also have clock speed to play with. Polaris, once again, supposedly, can go over 1200, 1300 megahertz. Sony are, once again, supposedly, and I know I keep having to add that because ultimately Sony, Microsoft, AMD have not confirmed the stuff, but supposedly the clock speed is around 900 megahertz, so Microsoft could just choose to go with a very similar compute configuration, but just, say, ramp up the clock speed to 950 megahertz, should they desire. My point being that this is a lot of information, and just like the NX leaks, there's a lot of information that in isolation doesn't particularly mean much. It's a lot of stuff which is pointing to Microsoft doing something. We know they're doing something. We know they are. Because there have been reports from industry insiders that said an Xbox One Premium is coming. But what's a premium model? It's obviously, it could be, technically I guess, an Xbox One which has 4K capabilities built in, maybe cost reduced compared to the original model, although that technically wouldn't be premium, but they could have a really cheap version of the Xbox One which is cost reduced, and this premium model which is a little cheaper than the current Xbox One but has 4K streaming. It would have things such as, let's say, cooler running, it would be smaller, maybe have a larger hard drive, whatever they want to do. It could be bloody silver with bloody gold stripes on it for all we know, and that could be the premium version, or it could be a more powerful version. A lot of reports have said that we're going to be seeing a premium-like thing. Other reports have said that Microsoft are testing out components which you would typically use to upgrade your PC. That's not a verbatim quote, but it's pretty much verbatim. It's not me changing the words or the meaning. They've basically said that Microsoft are supposedly testing parts which would normally upgrade the next PC. It doesn't take a genius to figure out what you would normally use to upgrade a PC. Come on, say it with me. You'd upgrade the CPU, you would upgrade the GPU, you'd upgrade the RAM, you would upgrade, let's say, the hard drive. Technically, you could put in an SSD, and I guess you could say you could put in a hybrid drive or whatever. Me point being that there are a lot of different potential configurations for this whole fiasco. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I don't mean that in a negative or unexcited way. I more mean that this is a really freaking weird year. I mean, and this is getting somewhat off the beaten topic, but seriously, this is a pretty messed up year. And by which I mean that in the PS3 era, in the PS2 era, in even the PS1 era,
things have been pretty smooth. I mean, sure, there were some hiccups here and there, like, for example, when Sony released the slimline models, and there were a few changes, and even when back in the original PlayStation era, when Sony released the PS1, they released another PlayStation 1, which actually had a very slight clock speed bump with the CPU, and I believe the GPU, but I'm not 100% certain, but I definitely know the CPU had a bump in clock speed. Now, it didn't really improve the graphics, it more was supposed to help with frame rates and a few other bits and pieces throughout, and maybe loading times. But the console generations were pretty solid. The only times that I can think of we've had really weird console generations, and there have been some upgrades, like the Saturn upgrade we know about, the N64 upgrade, memory upgrades we've known about, but the 16-bit era was kind of weird, because we had TurboGrafx, and we had TurboGrafx CD and all of these different add-ons, the Genesis, or the Mega Drive if you prefer, with the CD add-on, or the 32X add-on, and, you know, these upgradable Half-Life consoles. But with virtual reality, with 4K TVs, with all of this technology coming out, with game engines moving on ever faster, with mobile phones becoming ever faster, with PC graphics cards becoming ridiculously powerful, we've got GPUs now which are like 14 T-flops, and supposedly with Polaris and Pascal, the performance to get to this card, I mean, one of the rumours I've heard, I just didn't bother to cover it because there have been so many bloody rumours, but one rumour that's pretty consistent is that the Polaris architecture is going to be about as equivalent as the 980 Ti, but it's going to be a lot cheaper. So for the sake of argument, you might get the Polaris, the high-end Polaris card, the Polaris 10 equivalent high-end card, which is going to maybe be slightly faster than 980 Ti, but it's going to cost, let's say, half the price. I'm obviously just giving an example, but this is going to definitely propel PC gaming forward. You've got a lot of vendors who are releasing PC hardware. You've got Steam, you've got bloody... It's just a really crazy time in the industry. It really is. You've got Sony who are supposedly working, or at least thinking internally, of releasing Project Morpheus, also known as PSVR, and supporting the PC. You've got Microsoft who are releasing Windows 10 and an ecosystem and blurring the lines between the PC and the Xbox One, so possibly users are going to use the Xbox One as, I guess, an entry-level system. But what happens if they release a premium Xbox One that's twice as powerful, 3 times powerful, 4 times powerful than the base machine? Is it going to be the Xbox One base, the slimline versions, really cheap, easy way to play, the quantum breaks, and then the high-end Xbox One is for the better resolutions, but the bleeding-edge PCs if you want 4K? It's really weird. And this year, I think, is going to be a transitionary time in the industry. You've got virtual reality and all this other stuff coming out, but you've also got Vulkan, you've got DirectX 12, you've got new game engines, and developers now are just starting to get used to how these new game engines work and start to really push artificial intelligence. And don't even get me started on things like AI and physics, simulations, cloth simulations, particles and physics and games, and this stuff eats performance alive. It really does. My point being, and I know I'm getting really off topic here from an Xbox One video, but my point being that this is a really weird time in the industry, and I really want to see what the fucking hell, excuse the language, is revealed at E3. I wouldn't be surprised if we don't hear anything from these developers or consoles at E3. It might be that we don't hear anything until later in the year. I guess it might be a chicken and egg situation. It might be Sony doesn't want to show anything until Microsoft shows something, or Microsoft are just holding fire for a while. It's really weird. We know something's brewing, and a lot of folks in the industry, even oh god, I've forgotten his name, but the chap behind SCE, he said there might not be a PlayStation 5. Maybe the future of Sony, or rather the PlayStation, is iterative hardware, new hardware revisions. Maybe Microsoft are going to do the same thing. They've hinted it. Phil Spencer's hinted it. Weird. Anyway, hopefully you've enjoyed the video. I'll see you soon. Take care. Bye for now.